Another vague Tyrann Mathieu tweet hit Twitter on Wednesday, and Chiefs fans could be getting nervous. This one read, quote, "If they make me choose, I'ma choose to take it back to where it all started," end quote. Is Tyrann Mathieu quoting a lyric, talking about a uniform number change, or about his negotiations toward a new contract? The Chiefs are believed to be working on an extension for Mathieu, who signed a 3-year, $42 million deal 2 years ago, so it's time for an extension. On today's SportsBeat KC, beat writers Herbie, Teope, and Sam McDowell discuss Mathieu's situation and several other Chiefs topics. It's June 9th, I'm Blair Kerkhoff, so let's get started talking Chiefs with Herbie and Sam. So last month, Tyrann Mathieu put out a tweet, or he was responding to someone else's tweet about about his contract, and Tyrann Mathieu responded to it and then took it down. So, Sam, I'm trying to find your story that you wrote about it. I'll do it quickly, but I've got that right, don't I? Approximately, it had to do with what's taken the contract negotiation so long, and then both Tyrann Mathieu and Brett Veach, or at least Tyrann Mathieu, got to speak to it a little bit during OTAs. And I thought, okay, quiet. It's not going to, it's not a news story, no longer a news story. And then this morning, another tweet pops up, and I don't know social media as well as you guys, as well as a lot of people, but when I see a tweet like this, where it says from Tyrann Mathieu's account, "If they make me choose, I'm going to choose to take it back where it all started." Well, I don't know. It just seems to me that he's not. It can be interpreted as not being terribly happy where it stands with at least the pace of the negotiations. Am I off base with that?
Yeah, I mean, Tyrann Mathieu, whenever he did speak on it, I think I was the one who asked him about it at that press conference. He said he wouldn't read too much into it, and that was a tweet that directly said that it wasn't looking likely he was going to come back. So he kind of took the steam out of his own tweets and says, a lot of times I delete tweets, and he laughed about it. It's a situation we've talked a lot about, and last year I think is a good roadmap for how they deal with these situations. They sort of take care of their own last, because that's what the offseason demands as far as the order of events with free agency and the NFL draft. And even last year, I mean, the Patrick Mahomes deal got done in mid-June. And then you had Chris Jones in late June. Then you had Travis Kelce, who was the most similar situation to Tyrann Mathieu, in July. And we're still not there yet. And I still have always looked at training camp as sort of the time when, if they're going to extend Tyrann Mathieu, it would be wise to do it before training camp begins. And, we're still over a month away from that.
Here's the deal with that, too, to echo what Sam says, because I specifically asked Brett Veach twice this offseason, where is Mathieu on the priority list? And, to Sam's point, Veach pointed out how they got Mahomes done and how they got Jones done and how they got Kelce done. And those weren't actually done in June. They were done in July. Once there was that break between the end of minicamp and the start of training camp, they got Mahomes done. They got Jones done before the franchise tag deadline, which is every year, July the 15th. And then at the start of training camp, they got Travis Kelce done. They have time right now. The Chiefs are going to have to finagle the salary cap, because as of today, they only have $8 million in available cap space. So if you're going to get something done with Mathieu, which we're going to assume is going to be a multi-year, probably 20, 30 plus million a year, they're going to have to move some pieces around to free up some cap space and be able to get that deal done.
Well, it's not going to be that rich. I think that Justin Simmons is the highest paid safety in the NFL, and he's just making $15 a year. So,
yeah, but you're also talking about a 2-time All-Pro.
Justin Simmons,
you got all that going for him.
Justin Simmons, to me, is going to still be the highest paid safety, and that's probably some of the disagreement as whether or not Tyrann Mathieu should be the highest paid safety in the league. But it would not be that big of a difference. Like, it's not going to be $20 million. I would be surprised to see anything. Maybe Tyrann Mathieu's able to eclipse Justin Simmons, but if so, it's not more than $1 million a year. I cannot see the Chiefs paying Tyrann Mathieu more than $16 million a year.
The thing that Tyrann Mathieu has on his side is his representation. He's represented by arguably the most powerful sports agency in the NFL. We're talking about CAA. He's represented by Condon. They're going to try to get the most. It's maybe he wants to be the highest paid safety. We'll see. But, you can pretty much guarantee Condon and his guys are going to try to get the most they can for Mathieu.
Sam, why do you think that he should, we should have a discussion about whether he should be the highest paid safety? I think his credentials are terrific, right? All pro, 2 years in the Chiefs uniform, 2 Super Bowl appearances, Super Bowl victory. Easily the emotional leader of this defense, and every bit as integral to the success of this team as I think anybody besides Patrick Mahomes. So doesn't he have a case to be the highest paid safety in the NFL?
Yeah, sure he does. But he's 2 years younger than Justin Simmons and signing his contract 1 year later than Justin Simmons. So there's a 3-year gap there between when Justin Simmons got paid $15.5 million a year and when Tyrann Mathieu wants to potentially get paid $16 million a year. So to me, that's the biggest thing. And I also did not think Tyrann Mathieu had the same year he had in 2019. I didn't think he was as good in 2020 as he was in 2019. So, if this deal was, or if we're talking about this last off season because his contract is 1 year shorter, I think it's more likely he gets that number. So for me, it's just the timing and the age are the 2 reasons. And Justin Simmons is the best safety in the NFL. I'm not trying to take away from Tyrann Mathieu, and I do think he's got an influence that stretches beyond what he does on the field. We've all talked to that guy in the locker room. We've all talked to his teammates about that guy in the locker room. But I think that Justin Simmons is the best safety in the NFL, and he's 2 years younger, signing his contract a year earlier.
Okay, if we were to take that tweet at face value and think of it as something of or at least interpret it as something of a, I can go elsewhere if I need to. What does he mean? What could he possibly mean by going home? Is that to Arizona where it all started? His NFL career? Is it the Saints? He grew up in New Orleans. What do you think, Herbie?
I think you're just setting it up so Herbie can mention the Saints once on this podcast.
I don't want to speculate on this. That's the problem with tweets when we try to decipher what it means. Sam brought up a good point before we hit the air. Is it a song lyric? I don't know. We Googled it and it's not. That's sometimes these athletes just tweet out some stuff and next thing you know, we think it's one thing and it's the complete opposite. I would say this. We're supposed to have media availability every day during mandatory minicamp on June the 15th to the 17th. Tyrann Mathieu is going to be a requested player, and hopefully he can clear this up.
Herbie, could you not show our age by saying that we had to Google to see if this was a song lyric? That was supposed to be off the record.
Well, I'll tell you how much that shows our age. I asked you guys to Google if it was a song lyric because it didn't even come close to registering with me. So, hey, and so speaking of the salary cap, Julio Jones signed with the Tennessee Titans. I know that happened on Sunday, I believe. I think that's when the news broke. We're interested in here in Kansas City for a couple of reasons. One, it seems like when Brett Veach and Andy Reid want a guy, they go get him, and we've seen it before. And there's you can make the case there is a need at wide receiver for a second big target at that position. But it seems to me, Herbie, this was a long shot, always a long shot, and probably improbable for the Chiefs.
I remember I'm old enough to remember last week we were sitting on this very podcast and you asked that exact question. You're like, what are the odds? And I said, basically 0% to 0 because of that. You mentioned the contract. Whoever got him had to absorb Julio Jones's massive contract. And the Titans were able to get creative because they restructured Ryan Tannehill's deal And Tannehill just recently signed a massive extension. So that's the reason why they were able to get the deal done. When you look at the Chiefs roster, they would have to ask Mahomes to restructure, Chris Jones to restructure, Frank. I mean, they had a lot of moving pieces to even think about Julio Jones. I just, from the very beginning, I know like they were all saying, hey, Julio Jones to Kansas City, let's get it done. Well, all the fans were saying that at least. I just looked at the numbers. I was like, I just don't see how they'll be able to do this. I mean, yeah, sure, where there's a will, there's a way. The Titans showed it because, they were like one of the teams that had the lowest amount of available cap space, but they did it by going to their quarterback, who they just signed to an extension, and said, if we want Jones, we're going to have to restructure your deal. And they got it done.
Going to the Titans, when I saw the headline, there was a tease headline on one of the websites that Julio Jones goes to AFC contender. And I was, would you go to the Ravens? You go to the Bills? He went to the Browns? And you click on the story, and it was the Titans. Is this a good fit for Tennessee, Sam? Is it? Tennessee's a team that's a ground and pound team with Derrick Henry. I guess it opens it up a little bit for the offense, for Tannehill and the offense. But does this make Tennessee a contender if they weren't already?
Yeah, I still think their defense has too many issues. Their defense really took a step back last year, and they did make some moves defensively, so they could be better. But I don't know. Does it make them one of the teams that the Chiefs should worry about? Probably not, but it certainly makes them better. I think the more interesting question is it a good fit for Julio Jones, and probably not. Because they do have AJ Brown, so I realized that some attention is going to be off of him. But he was playing with Calvin Ridley, and Calvin Ridley's no slouch. So I think he already had that sort of combination. So I don't know how much that helps him. And you already mentioned it. The Titans are not a pass-first football team. They're a run-first team, and I just think he's going to see fewer targets than he has at any point in his career because of that.
Okay, guys, got a couple more topics I want to cover with you, but let's take a break, and we'll be right back. We're back with Herbie Teope and Sam McDowell. They cover the Chiefs for the Kansas City Star. Nobody does it better than these guys. We're in what amounts to spring football, right? OTAs and the mandatory minicamp next week, and maybe Tyrann Mathieu's tweet aside, there's been pretty little drama with the Chiefs in this camp, unlike other places. Green Bay in particular. That's every news cycle now. There's a story coming out of Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers. So I guess we should count our blessings a little bit, right? That we don't have that kind of news story to worry about every single day, Herbie.
Yeah, and sometimes being quiet is good. So you don't have to worry about. I feel bad for the Green Bay Packers writers because that's got to be a nonstop cycle. Is Aaron Rodgers showing up? Is he not? And then when you look around across the league, they all enter their camps with a lot of questions at certain position groups. Denver, who's going to start? Teddy Bridgewater or Drew Lock. We don't have that here in Kansas City, and that's a good thing. That's also a testament to the front office and to the coaching staff. They've built this solid foundation where it's, when it is running right, it's a smooth ship, smooth sailing.
Yeah, we're talking about a second wide receiver that they may or may not need, right? I mean, you can make a case that they could stand pat with what they have with Mecole Hardman and Byron Pringle and Demarcus Robinson battling it out for receptions behind Tyreek Hill. But if they don't add somebody, I think they're pretty solid at that position. But it is worth asking: should that be maybe a target for the Chiefs in building the final 53? Should they be set at wide receiver? Sam, what do you think?
I thought that they needed to add somebody in the offseason, but, I guess need is probably the wrong word. More of a luxury than an exact need. But I still thought that it would have really benefited them to have a 2 wide receiver. Now, they played without one a lot last year because Sammy Watkins has been hurt so often over his career with the Chiefs. So they're used to the group that they're going forward with. But the thing I've consistently come back to in this situation is if Tyreek Hill gets hurt, this team is in a lot of trouble. And of course, he's always been a key player. Of course, you've got guys like Mahomes, Kelsey, Tyreek Hill that were always going to be big injuries. But I just thought they could have added some protection for that by adding a guy that I didn't even think he had to be a top line wide receiver, just a guy who was a solid 2. And, we know that they offered Juju Smith-Schuster, so they at least at some point thought they could make room for a guy in that wide receiver room. But they were consistent about throughout the offseason. Their messaging was they're not going to go get a guy just to go get a guy. It's got to be a player that they specifically like at the position. We saw them do that with offensive tackle, and it worked out for them. And, with wide receiver, maybe there's a guy in training camp. They do like Antonio Callaway, a guy that they picked up in the offseason. I think that's a guy that's not being talked about enough because they're pretty high on him. And we'll see what Powell's able to offer him. But as a rookie in Andy Reid's offense, we saw with McCall Hardman, it can be a lot to ask a guy to jump right in.
Sam brings up the wide receiver who I'm really, really interested to see when the pads come on. When Sam mentions that they're really high on him, just think about this. Brett Veach twice this offseason, unprompted, mentioned Antonio Callaway by name. And if he didn't have his legal issues in Cleveland, it'd be interesting to see where he would be right now with his career. We're talking about a guy who's still relatively young, 24 years old, and the Browns had high hopes for him, but again, the legal issues. And that's what kind of like set his career back. But Veach likes him. He's pointed him out twice already. I can tell you, and Sam can probably tell you the same thing because we've both been out there at practice. He looks the part. He absolutely looks the part. So, once the pads come on is when I'm really curious to see what he looks like. Yeah,
his rookie year for a not great Browns team, I think it was 2018 or was it 17, Herbie?
18, fourth round pick.
2018. He had almost 600 yards and 5 touchdowns for that Browns team. And like Herbie said, he ran into some issues afterwards, and that's what derailed his development. And so I think that the Chiefs think that they can tap back into that guy who was a rookie with that kind of season and maybe on the ascent rather than a guy that they've seen over the past couple of years that had to play in I can't even remember the name of the new league that the XFL
yeah.
last 1 year. So
just throw some letters out there.
Just end it with FL, something FL.
Right. It's funny, isn't it, that we base a lot of we start to reach conclusions on some of these players based on what is said in press conference, not actually by talking to the players or witnessing, their performances. But that's how it works, right? And we talked about Jarran Reed last week and how it was a mention an emphatic mention by Andy Reid about how we're kind of might be missing the boat on him. That all of a sudden you're thinking, oh, okay, wow, the defensive line might be in okay shape and not be hurt in the way it is. But it's kind of same with the Tyrann Mathieu tweet. You just sort of have to find the clues
it's just become part of our job just because of the limited availability that we have now and talking to these guys so often. With Andy Reid, when he says something, I feel like all of us on this call know exactly what he means because of the way we've heard him frame other things. And so when he brings up a guy like Jarran Reed, for example, out of the blue, it means more to us than if somebody asks him a question and then he answers that he's a great football player and he's fitting in well here. And that's why when Herbie mentioned that about Brett Veach, it's important to note that we did not ask about Antonio Callaway, that was somebody he added to the list of guys that could potentially fill in at that spot.
That's a good distinction, Sam, that when it comes from when it's volunteered versus when it's asked.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yep. So just a couple other things quickly before we get out of here. And look, Herbie, we'll speak in general next week, not in general, but we'll a little more profoundly about media access to players. That is going to be curtailed, going to continue in the Zoom world for training camp and the regular season, which are very dispiriting for media and public will be ill served by that. And we'll get into it in a bigger way next week. But there was some other news, a little off the field news this week with Brett Veach. Pleaded not guilty, got some driving privileges back. Basically doesn't change anything though, Sam, does it? I mean, it's the getting the driving privileges. He has to take a breathalyzer, I think, before he can start a car. But just in terms of his legal path, this doesn't change anything.
No, I mean, I think his next appearance will be in July, with no trial date set. But it does. I guess, you're right. It doesn't change anything. It does clue you in maybe a little bit to how this process might go, which is the fact that they could potentially be setting up for a trial or maybe a better plea deal. But it tells you obviously that they haven't reached any sort of agreement as of yet.
Okay. Hey, and then one final topic. We talked about Bashaud Breeland last week, and of course he's gone off to the Minnesota Vikings now. 1-year deal for $4 million. He's the king of the 1-year proven deals, Bashaud Breeland. That's kind of how his career has gone. It has left the Chiefs with a lot of familiar names at the position, but in terms of just experience, starting experience. Is corner, Herbie, a place that the Chiefs need to be a little concerned about, or you think that what's there now, the DeAndre Bakers, Mike Hughes, Bo-Pete Keys, Rashad Fenton, L'Jarius and Snead, and of course Charvarius Ward, is that going to be enough for the Chiefs?
Here's the thing. I think that especially the two names you mentioned first, DeAndre Baker and Mike Hughes. To me, those two players represent low risk, high reward type scenarios. We're talking about two former first round draft picks. I go back to week 17 when DeAndre Baker, he got a chance to start before he suffered that gruesome leg injury. The guy was out there balling against the Chargers' number one offense. I thought he looked really good until that broken leg. Hughes just needs to stay healthy. The Chiefs were high on Bo-Pete Keys when they traded back into the draft last year and used their last or seventh round pick to grab him. And now that he's somewhat healthy, it's setting up a lot of great competition. We know the Chiefs love competition. And then when you've got, Ward and Fenton and L'Jarius Snead projecting as your top three, this is going to be some great competition here for those fourth and fifth spots. And maybe DeAndre Baker and Hughes will battle for a starting position. I just think there's nothing wrong with a good competition.
Yeah, I think it's what they feel uneasiest about going into the season as that group. And it's not just the inexperience, because they do have inexperience. They lost their veteran guy in that room. But it's also just they're unsure, I think, even if they pick the three guys they like, where those three guys might line up. I think L'Jarius Snead is an outside cornerback. That's what he came up as. And he had never played slot cornerback until he did it really, really well last year. But I still think naturally you want Charvarius Ward and L'Jarius Snead on the outside. And that led to letting Bashaud Breeland walk. But I still don't know necessarily who you put in the slot. If it's Rashad Fenton, we've seen him play there more during the 2019 season. Steve Spagnuolo said that last week, that they've got to figure out where guys are going to play best, even the guys that they like and who fits in. Bo-Pete Keys is a really interesting name to me. Like Herbie said, they thought enough of him to get back in the draft, and then we didn't hear from Bo-Pete Keys last year. And I don't know whether they thought he just needed some more time to learn, and that maybe now he becomes a bigger part of the equation this year.
Yeah, and Keys had a rough start in training camp last year. Remember, he was also hurt. He had the orbital fracture, and he was just never fully healthy until at some point in the regular season they were able to start getting him in there.
Okay, guys, great conversation as always, and we will pick it up again next week. I think the spring training, the end of spring football is in sight, and we'll come to you again at least one more time next week. All right, Herbie, Sam, thanks a lot, guys.
All right, thanks, Blair.
That'll do it for today. Thanks to our SportsBeat KC production staff of Derek Donovan, Beth Welsh, Monty Davis, Jeff Rosen, Chris Fickett, and Savannah Smith. A tip of the cap to Herbie Teope and Sam McDowell for Talkin' Chiefs. Links to their stories can be found in the show notes and on kansascity.com. Hey, got another deal for you. You can subscribe to Sports Pass for 99 cents a month. That's right, 99 pennies a month. Sports Pass is the online version of the Star Sports section. You get all the stories that appear in the print editions of the Star, plus more stories that appear only on the website, and they certainly appear first on kansascity.com. After 3 months, it auto-renews at $5.99 a month unless you cancel. It's a great time to subscribe. Read about what's going on with the Chiefs, the Royals, the colleges, the soccer teams, and more. How do you get it? You go to kansascity.com/sportspass2020. That's kansascity.com/sportspass2020. You want more than just sports coverage? Check out the entire Kansas City Star product. Sports news, features, commentary, and analysis, the whole thing. You get all the stories written by my talented colleagues, plus additional national news, sports, and business coverage with the e-edition. The details for all of these deals can be found at account.kansascity.com/subscribe. If you're having trouble hunting down any of the offers, you just send me an email, bkerkhoff@kcstar.com, and I'll get you to the right place. So whether it's the Sports Pass or the full subscription, you're getting and supporting the best sports and news coverage in Kansas City and helping us produce programs like SportsBeat KC. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back on Thursday with another episode.